When China's Communist Party assembled in Beijing's Great Hall of the People on October 16th for its once in 5 years event, not just to elect and re-elect a leader and 2,296 delegates from every level of the Communist Party, but the leader of China for the next 5 years. And all eyes were on Chinese President Xi Jinping, who has many enemies in China's political hierarchy, having cracked down hard on corruption. Even then, he had been a front-runner to secure an unprecedented third term, which was abolished earlier, with party leadership being limited to 2 terms of 5 years each by Deng Xiaoping after Chairman Mao Zedong. And on first day itself, he gave a 90-minute speech listing his achievement and his vision for China, making it clear that a firm and aggressive China, both overseas and at home, is what must be aspired for, with the Communist Party being in charge of everything from life to liberty for China to achieve a common model of prosperity. This 20th Congress was held at a time when China's economy was reeling under the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, and so China has modest economic growth targets to revive its real estate sector that accounts for 30% of China's GDP. But linked to China's economic revival is the world economy, since China is a key supplier of multiple products across the world. But of equally great concern is how the increasing rivalry between China and the United States would play out in the coming years, which could range from tensions over Taiwan to United States restrictions on sale of microchips to China. Bureau Report, Times Now.
We have 2 experts on China. We have Professor Kondapalli, who's now Dean of the School of International Studies at the JNU and also heads the East Asian Studies Center there, and has been quite easily amongst the foremost Indian experts on China. And we have Major General retired Dwivedi, who has morphed into a classic soldier scholar, having not just done 1 MPhil but 2 and a PhD, and having served in China as a defense attaché, where he had the privilege to attend an early party congress where he was able to see the whole process that the Chinese establishment goes through to elect their leaders, and has written extensively on India, China, and looked at the boundary dispute from the Chinese perspective, from the other side of the fence, as I would put it. So, General Dwivedi, sir, you have attended the Congress in the past. The Congress, I believe, is a large organization where for the Chinese, it is the ultimate recognition to be able to enter that and to be party to all the major decision making. But there are 1 or 2 things that remain unexplained to lesser mortals like us. One is how is it that the Congress has such a large say on whatever constitutional process that takes place in China? How is it that the Congress can review the constitution and elevate a person like Xi Jinping or anybody else from the rank of General Secretary to the Chairman? What is the legacy of Mao Tse Tung there and his successors such as Hu Jintao and Deng Xiaoping? Why is the current Congress arrangement such a matter of interest to the world when many things regarding the Chinese establishment, the outside world takes for granted?
Well, Maroof, firstly, always a pleasure to be on your show and in the company of good old friend, Siri. And I think you have chosen a very contemporary and a very current topic, which has far-reaching implications, not only for China, but at world at large, and especially India, where we don't enjoy such a amiable relation with the neighbor, the emerging superpower. So you have actually asked me to give a little deeper background as to how exactly this People Congress is orchestrated, how does it go about doing its business? And rightly so, I attended the 15th Party Congress in 1997. So I can give you a ringside view. First and foremost, in China, it is the party that is supreme. In fact, party overrides the state. So therefore, Communist Party of China is the apex organization. It's overrides People's Republic of China. That's where the start point is. And that's how the whole structure of People's Republic of China has been drawn out or have been put in place. Now, Communist Party of China actually drives the complete process. And this is where the leadership, the policies, and how the nation is going to address its internal and external issues all evolve. Now, think about Communist Party of China. It was, in 1921, it came into being in July, and last year we had discussion on your show on a centenary. Now, from there on, 100 years, lot has happened. Three things are very important. Firstly, the leadership, because Mao Tse Tung was the architect and he was the one who steered the Communist Revolution, and it became a republic in 1949. Now, what happened was that time it was a single leader around which the whole party galvanized, and that was the legacy of Mao Zedong, and he continued for almost 26 years, and he was the unquestioned leader. So the Communist Party that time revolved around one single leader, which was known as the Ko, and the party was around him. And then Deng Xiaoping, who took over, they were the past struggle. The same thing somewhat continued. So all the party congress which took place up to Deng Xiaoping, they were around these two leaders. But what happened? When Deng Xiaoping was in power from 78 till 97 February, he evolved a structure which had couple of characteristics. First and foremost, the limit should be laid by the incumbent, head of the party or secretary general. Two terms were laid out. Second point, it has to be collective leadership, because what the lessons brought out was a single person can mislead the nation, and there are a lot of mistakes committed by Mao. To rectify that, it was a collective leadership. And that's how Jiang Zemin had 2 terms and Hu Jintao also had 2 terms. And then Xi Jinping was elected as the 5th generation leader in 2012. And they were understanding that he will continue for 2 terms as the predecessor. Right? Now that's where the story takes a different turn in the 20th Party Congress. Little bit on the structure of the party.
I'll come to you, General Sir, a little later, because Professor Kondapalli, we need to bring him in. Professor Kondapalli, General has given a wonderful background about how the terms of reference are laid out. Now, one of the points that he made strikes me that I think you can enlighten us a bit. Xi Jinping has been, in a way, promoting the importance of the party, but I get a feeling he's larger than the party. He has been very harsh on initiatives that he has implemented against corruption. He has been very, very strong as far as his control of the armed forces are concerned, because earlier the PLA seemed to be a power unto itself. But Xi Jinping has brought about that system wherein the party and the head of the party is supreme. So where is it that his legacy is going to be a counter legacy to the kind of terms laid out by Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping?
This is a very important question about the legacy of President Xi Jinping. So when he took over in 2012, he initiated the anti-corruption drive across the country. And by today, there is 1.5 million cadres, and military or other local cadres have been arrested. And as part of the Flies and Tigers campaign, the anti-corruption drive actually hit the opposing factions of Xi Jinping, specifically those belonging to Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao before. number one. So Xi Jinping's legacy is to decimate other factional leaders' historical, contribution and influence in the party, thereby also projecting his own influence across the board. Number one. Number two is, unlike other leaders since Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping, by decimating all those factional leaders, opposing factional leaders, had also created a highly centralized system within China, with Xi Jinping as the head of that huge, party apparatuses. So since Mao Tse Tung's time, Mao prevailed from 1945 till 1976, his death. So he was the supreme leader. Likewise, Xi Jinping today has no major rivals. There are factional leaders who are opposing him even today, but nevertheless, it is considered to be a highly centralized. For example, Xi Jinping is heading some 13 bodies. CMC chairman, Central Military Commission chairman. He is the president. He is the general secretary of the party. He is the head of the small leading groups. He is head of the comprehensively deepening reforms. He is now the chief of the army, a post that he had taken recently. He is also the head of the emergency relief body, which basically looks at all the emergency aspects. For example, Galwan, for example, South China Sea, Taiwan Straits. After Nancy Pelosi's visit, there has been a huge mobilization. So Xi Jinping directly controls those. So second aspect is highly centralized powers. In fact, one Australian scholar mentioned he's chairman of everything. And thereby this centralization has happened. The third is to consolidate the economic aspects. Although there has been a decline in growth rates from 14% in the 90s to the current 2.3% estimated for this year by the IMF, although Chinese government says 5.6% growth rate, nevertheless, there is a huge decline in economic growth rates. Nevertheless, the GDP has increased from $5.6 trillion to the current $16.9 trillion last year. So there has been a 3 times increase in the GDP of China, which basically also creates a lot of jobs and the well-off society concept and unemployment and other things. Okay. The fourth contribution is in terms of pitching China against the US, EU, and other countries. Today, we are entering into a difficult course with the dual circulation strategy domestically, but also the Belt and Road Initiative competing with the global powers. So the Biden administration national security strategy, in fact, mentions how to outcompete China. That is what the legacy of Xi Jinping would also be in pitching against the US.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, this is comprehensive enough. We'll come back after a break to look at one or two other important areas on how Xi Jinping has defined the successive eras of Chinese leadership, how it has changed China's outlook and where he wishes to, or he was keen that China should go into in the coming century. But that after a break. Welcome back. We are looking at the Chinese Party Congress and how it functions. What are the legacies of respective Chinese leaders? Where is China headed now in the coming few decades and the century? And quite clearly, the shadow of Xi Jinping is very large over the Party Congress, in as much as some would argue as large or perhaps larger soon to be than even that of Mao Tse Tung. General Dwivedi, sir, I want you to explain a bit that Mr. Xi Jinping has significantly said that Mao Tse Tung's time was the revolution period. Deng Xiaoping's time was the building period. He has said Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao's terms were the reform period. And he has said that his own term is a whole new era. Please explain.
Absolutely. No, Maroof, Xi Jinping era, what it is called is Shin Shizai, means new era. He has actually overhauled China both internally and also on the external dimension. Internally, he started with a very clear cut, I think, uh, aims and objectives. And what he did was he laid out a China dream, that is Chungma. And that was that China will emerge as a global power by about mid of this century. And that was a huge shift because as far as Deng Xiaoping was concerned and the latter two, Chiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, they abided by the policy of hide and bide, means hide your stand and wait for your time. But Xi Jinping actually made Chinese aspiration absolutely open. He went on two tracks because China's power lies on two pillars. One is the party and second is the PLA. So he went on to reform the party and he went more ideologically close to what Mao did because there was an effort on the part of Deng Xiaoping and later to do little bit of opening on political reforms, but he absolutely put a cap on that and he went ideologically almost what Mao did. Point number one. Second issue is that he reformed the PLA because as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, China's global aspiration can only be fulfilled in case China has a strong political PLA, that is strong army. So therefore, he redefined and transformed the army by giving it a global role, first and foremost, ensuring the party is under the PLA is under the party, that is party controls the gun. Alongside, he did a absolute rejig. I mean, did CMC was overhauled, theater commands were created, court was created, and the new roles were given, like the PLA Navy to look at the globe, not only coastal defense. PLA Air Force look at the aerial power, and similarly, the armed forces should be able to project themselves across the globe because they brought in new legislation, new defense, law, and also new border law. Now, internally, what he did was that there was a parallel government which used to run along with the party. He has put the party over the governance. That is, the governance today is under the party. He removed this consultative process. It's totally authoritarian. And alongside, what he has done is that he has amended the constitution. That is to say that he will be the lifelong president. So third term is given, which is he is getting. But the point is, it is beyond third term and beyond what we are looking at is the lifelong president, lifelong the chairperson of PL party, because party is the supreme and Secretary General of the party is the main power that he draws. So in nutshell, what I would like to say is that Xi Jinping era marks China's emergence as a global power. Xi Jinping era marks China's restoration of old glory, and it defies very categorically the current system of world order. He is all set to set the new world order.
Okay, so that's again very detailed assessment. Professor Kondapalli, two questions in this question. One is you were talking about the Chinese economy is overall, the GDP has grown overall. The growth numbers are not as good as were expected, but still China's economy is very, very strong. Point to explain is that I think a very contestable area where China's economy could be headed now is the real estate sector. Apparently 30% of China's GDP is linked to the growth of the success of the real estate sector, which I'm told is now floundering. So a bit of insight on that. And the second thing is Xi Jinping's legacy also includes the aspect of trying to use military weapons and power demonstration to have political significance and messaging both at home and abroad? Your views?
On the economy, there is a lot of reorganization that Xi Jinping had undertaken. As you rightly mentioned, the real estate is a big issue. Till last year, there has been a huge jump in the real estate prices in China, all across China, because there has been a huge construction activity. Let me just give you a figure that 180 million apartments were unsold because of the very high real estate prices in China. But last year, because of tweaking by the banks, by the local governments, and the three red lines issued by the Communist Party to reduce these prices and say that this is not for speculation, but for the households. So as a result, there has been a decline in prices in the last 13 months. And this resulted in a problem also for selling these products because there are no newcomers coming in for the sale of these units in the real estate. But you're right that 30% of the GDP is invested here because every year they were trying to showcase that modernization means real estate building. So that 11% of the GDP every year used to go into the infrastructure projects. 11% of last year, $17 trillion has gone into these. So one is the real estate problem, which is actually not just cyclical, but structural in nature, which means even though Xi Jinping is trying to fix this, it is going to actually be a long-term problem for China. Number two is the big business. He wanted now big business to come under the party leadership, like the Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, and other groups. Because Jack Ma suggested that the banking system is not so good in China. So he was almost put in house arrest. He is not, we do not know where exactly he is. And his valuations in Shenzhen, Shanghai, or his shares have really gone down. There is an agreement with the big businesses now.
I want to move. I want you to move from big business because of paucity of time into this muscle flexing, military muscle flexing, which again China has become now a cause of concern all over the world. It wasn't the case maybe 10 years ago.
Indeed, since he took over in 2012, Xi Jinping announced the core interests are more important than developmental interests. Thereby, he started focusing on Taiwan, South China Sea, Senkaku Islands, India-China borders. Doklam happened, Galwan happened under his tenure. Without his knowledge, these could not have happened. None of these four issues, assertiveness or aggressiveness, is associated with this. And in the 19th Party Congress, he announced that he will build a world-class military by 2049, which means that power projection forces like rapid response forces, Navy, Air Force, strategic rocket forces, these are the ones which were singled out for power projection. Also, that means that there is a lot of now thrust defense budget allocation, $220 billion officially allocated. We estimate around 350 of those $1 billion. So which means then since 2015 reorganization of the PLA, they now want theater commands, integrated joint operations, and power projection. So that is the reason why since 2009, they have the two ocean strategy, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and also the maritime doctrine changed to near seas protection and far seas operations. So that indicates that there is a lot that China's Navy is doing right now. But also in terms of the counter-terrorism and others, the PAPF, People's Armed Police Force, or Special Operation Force have now been put in place because of the Afghan developments. And so there is a lot that is happening under Xi Jinping as the CMC chairman in the military
Okay, so you've covered a lot of ground, as always, Professor Kondapalli. Quite clearly, China is going to become even more stronger, and as the Americans fear, as the biggest challenge to American dominance in geopolitics. But that is the subject of another debate. Thank you very much for your wisdom, and to both of you for enlightening us. And thanks to everybody for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.